All right, I think we are ready to begin. Welcome to Champion's second installment of Office Hours featuring pricing. My name is Robin Chaffin, and I am on the Champion team, Business Development Manager. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We know it's not ideal to be taking time to get away from the business, but we really appreciate your time with us
Yeah, a lot of
here.
names I recognize.
We hope that by deep diving pricing, we can provide some clarity, answer your questions, especially with the R410A to R450B transition. Just a couple things before we get started. Um, we are opening it up for questions at the end, but if you have any questions that you think of later, please feel free to reach out to me or Ram or anybody on the Champion or ask team. Questions during let the us know what you're thinking. Free to do so. So please either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put questions in the chat and I will watch that as well. I want to thank Sean for joining us today. I'll make it available to you later everybody for hanging on a little and extra. Without further ado, hope you have a great day. Please join me in welcoming our subject matter expert, Sean Haney, manager of JCI Pricing.
Hey, everybody. Good morning or afternoon where you're at.
Morning.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing today. And again, yeah, feel free to raise your hand or speak up. Either way, pretty casual thing. So, okay. So just today, really just talking about IPAs, touch on the matrix a little bit, and then also in Navigator, like where do we go to find some of this stuff, right? So internally we have a couple types of pricing. So we have standard price, right? So that's the price that you pay every day for the product, just to bring it into stock. Pretty typical on that. Then we have IPAs or SPAs, depending on what you want to call it, but basically a price below your standard price. So you bill it to you at your standard price, and then you come back, file an IPA, and then we give you a credit for that. And then we also have this Matrix IPA, which is fairly new. On the commercial side, it's been around for a while. On the residential side, we're kind of touching into it. It's still pretty green, but we can walk through some of that as well. The biggest thing there, just like the commercial side, it's pre-approved, so you can go ahead and use it when needed. Standard pricing. So to find your standard price, right? So what is my cost in this product? The easiest way, there's really two ways. The easiest way is to go to price list in Navigator as one option. You can do it for a whole list. You can do it for one model. You can do it for one family. Pretty easy on that front, and I have an example coming up. Another option that I did not put on here, but it's pretty easy, is you could go to Navigator, search your model, and then once you search your model and you click on it, when you should go into that model, I think I'm trying to remember the terminology they use, but it's like the landing page is when you search, and then there's like a detail page when you click on it, but that gives you list price and cost in there as well. But for the price list, I know this is a little bit more of a hot topic because you want to see a range of pricing. So when doing that, when you go to price list, there's some certain things that you have to make sure that are accounted for before the report will run. The one thing that I will caution you on is do not just put a date and a brand and then run it. It will bomb out. So that's kind of the bullet here. But basically, if you know your range that you want to do for models, you can copy and then paste those in. If you know price families, you can put from to, or you can just paste certain price families in. You got to pick a date or it won't run. You can pick multiple brands at the same time, just control or shift. One of the more important pieces of this is this customer multiplier box. So if you leave that checked, and it comes checked whenever you go to the screen, but if you leave it checked, it's only going to pull the price family multiplier. In other words, for like the 14.3 SEER 2 AC, an 0164. If you run it for 0164 and you leave that checked, it's only going to give you like the multiplier and then discount for that entire family. It's not going to give you the price per model, right? So you want to uncheck that. That way you can get model specific. Once it gets done running, it'll pop up with an Excel file to open. And then there's a little bit of formatting you got to mess with, but not much. And then
What
again,
happens again, Sean, if you just leave it blank? What happens again?
yeah, that's what I was getting on. So
Okay.
yeah, so not defining the criteria you're looking for will cause it to run a wide open list and bomb out. And so basically what happens is if you don't define what you're really looking for, it's basically trying to run everything residential and commercial and potentially like VRF, right? So if you don't define it, it's pulling in hundreds of thousands of models, and it just, the system can't handle it, right? So that's the best way to describe using a price list is be as intentional as you can be as far as what you want to see.
So
Right?
more is better.
Yeah. So, and the common thing I like to use with Wind Supply is good data in, good data out, right? If you're loading in good data, you're going to get good data back. And it's kind of the same way with the price list, right? So whatever, the more you tell it here, the better your results are going to be. So IPAs, so basically an IPA is just to help you secure business that you couldn't get at your standard price. Those would get submitted. This says quote management, quote status. Quote management is actually where you submit it. Quote status is where you can modify it. There is another way, not typically used on the res side, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So again, if you're buying it at your standard price, your everyday price, and that's how you brought in inventory, you can still use IPAs on that product because you bought it at full price. So it's good for a limited time only. That just means that there's an expiration date, right? It's not forever. And then we have what we call a margin sharing point. So if you submit an IPA at 12% and it comes back at 12%, then that would be the margin sharing point. And we say margin sharing point a lot because anything that you sell over the 12%, Wind Supply and JCI split, right? So if you sell it at 14 and the margin share is at 12, you're going to net 13 because you're going to get one, we're going to get one. We split that extra 2. So, and that does, when we do that, on our side of it, we actually change the IPA price. So the IPA price goes up. We don't just take that 1%, put it in our pocket. We actually put it into the price. And so that can affect your system. So you just have to keep that in mind when you're doing it. Because if you're loading in your 12% IPA cost, but you're actually selling it at 14, that cost is going to change and it's going to throw a flag up when you go to claim back because there's going to be a variance. And we'll touch on that a little bit more in that matrix to show. So just a couple different types. So we have a job IPA, right? So typically 90 days. It's specific to like one location, one address per se. You know, if it's one neighborhood, something like that. So we have some required information, and we'll walk through that as well. We have dealer IPAs, so a specific dealer or a dealer type, right? So if you have a couple different dealers that are about the same size, you know, same pricing, stuff like that, we can put those into the same IPA. So it doesn't just have to be one dealer per IPA. We can add multiple dealers to one IPA. This says typically 6 months. It is, lately it's been 6 months, but as you guys know, the past couple of years, sometimes it's 3 months, sometimes it's 4 months, but we're kind of getting back on track to every 6 months. And then sometimes they get extended to be 9 months or 12 months, right? So turnaround time on those is going to be 7 business days, but typically you're looking at just a couple days. It doesn't take as much as 7 days usually. And I will go back and preface on that job IPA one. So typically, if it's submitted that day, we'll get it back to you that day. In the worst case scenario, we get back to you next morning. Or if there's more information, we have to reach out on something. It might be a little bit more delayed, but for the most part, if it comes in that day, it goes back that day or next morning. So, and then claimbacks, kind of what we talked about earlier. So you buy it at standard price, and then you get a rebate back to the IPA price. And again, if there's no margin sharing, then it's just standard price minus the IPA price, and that's going to be your credit. Don't want to go too deep in the woods on claimbacks because that could be a whole nother presentation in itself. But basically, at the end of it, there's a couple different things that we need. So one being invoice number, invoice date. So that would be your invoice number to the customer and the date that you invoice them. What their name is, which model numbers did you sell, how many, how much did you sell it for, and then the serial number for the product. So IPA modifications. So this is done through quote status, right? So this would be an existing IPA that is active, or even it could have expired at this point, right? So, but an IPA number is already created. So it could be something that you want to change, you know, some of the pricing or the margin percentage. You need to add a new model, take a model off. Quantities, right? You can add more quantity to it. Expiration date extensions, right? So if it's expired and you need more time on it. So that's all done through quote status. I guess the only thing on this is when you submit a quote or when you modify a quote, just put in the comments, hey, this is what I'm doing, right? Because a lot of times we don't know. If you add a model, it's really easy to figure that part out. But if you're asking for an extension on the expiration date, and all you do is just resubmit it and you don't tell us anything, when it comes in, we don't know, right? So we kind of have two options. We either process it as no change, or we can send you an email and say, hey, like, what's going on, right? So ideally, I would like my team to do the latter and send you an email, but that's not always the case, right? Sometimes everybody gets busy, we get behind, there's no change, we're just going to push it back out. So if you submit a quote through quote status with some changes or need changes, right, expiration date, just go ahead and put that in the comments, and that way everybody kind of knows what's going on, and we're not asking a bunch of questions. So easiest thing to know there. So talking about the done or locking of a quote. So some of you may have seen this before, but when you go into quote status and you go into it, whether or not you hit modify or done, it will lock you in the quote. So in other words, if you're the first one in it and you're looking at it, and then you call me and you're like, hey, Sean, I need to do, I need to add X, Y, and Z model. Can you help? If I go into that IPA as well, I can't do anything to it, even internally. Like there's no override for me to override you. We're all one and the same within Navigator. With you being in there first, you have, easiest way to call it is dibs on any changes, right? So you have it locked. You're the first one in it. I can only view it. What's really important here is when you get done, if you don't make any changes, the easiest thing to do is just go to the bottom of the quote and click done. So if you just close out your screen, that's not actually clicking done, and it still locks you in there. So the easiest thing to do is just make sure you hit done, and then also the back arrow does not work within Navigator on the quote side of it. So if you're in modify mode and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do anything, don't just hit the back arrow because it's going to bomb out. If you can go to the bottom, there's an actual button that says back, right? So then you can go back and then you can click done. So if the IPA is a little bit bigger, it might take a second to load it and stuff, but yeah, if you are needing something done to it and you don't click done, we have to wait for it to time out. This says 60 minutes, but I think the reality is like a couple hours. Yeah, so anything to know in quote status, if you submit something, just put in the comments, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I'm doing. Click done when you're done, and then don't click the X and don't click the back arrow. Okay, so we have matrix pricing. So this is the commercial side of it. This has been around for a while, but basically you have, you know, different discounts or multipliers by GM%, right? So depending on how much you think you can make on that job is what discount would be given. And so this is pre-approved, right? So you don't have to submit an IPA on this stuff unless you win the job. So you can quote a bunch of different commercial jobs, and you don't have to submit an IPA on it unless you win them, right? So in the past, for you to get your price, you would have to go in there and submit your IPA and be like, hey, can I get this price? And we say yes, and then you go quote it. The way the commercial matrix works is this is all done up front. So you know ahead of time what your pricing is going to be and how much to mark it up. And then that way, when you quote to the customer, they say yes, then you can actually come in and file the IPA. So this can be as detailed as you want or as broad as you want. But if you quote 10 different commercial jobs in a month, and you use the matrix, and say you hit on 7 of them, right? You can submit 7 different job IPAs so you know which one to claim back to, and that way you have it by customer. You can even do it as one IPA. So take all that equipment, put it into the IPA, because the way that this works is it bases it off of an 8% share. So basically, if we put it at 8%, it will calculate up to the 9, 10, 11, 12, the way the math works. So if you have a couple jobs at 12, you know, a couple at 11, a couple at 10, and one at 8, we can still put them all together on the same IPA at 8, and they will still come out as they should be as you sold it. So when using the commercial matrix, there's a couple things that you do need. So you need the model, the MLP, you know which price family or product line it is. I'm on the residential side. I'm not on the commercial side, but I'm not as familiar with the product lines. So if you do know the product line, it's instead of being like product A, product B, product C, it would be product line, right? It would tell you which product line it is. And then you need to know which GM% column you're using because that's going to be the discount or multiplier that you would use. So an example for that would be this one model. We have a ZYG. We know it's in 2173. MLP is 20,967, and we want to make 12%. So you just take your 20,000 MLP times your discount, or multiplier, right? It's an inverse. That brings you out to a 6,583 cost. You take your cost divided by your GM% column, right? Whichever column you used. In this case, it was 12%, so we're going to divide by 0.88, or other math, you know, 1 minus 0.88, however you want to put it in there. And that would come out to a 7,481 sell price. So in short, it's just pre-approved pricing that you can use to go out there. And if you win the job, then you can just submit the IPA. And if you don't win it, you don't have to worry about it. You just go to the next one. So that's the commercial side. Residential side.
Excuse me, could you explain the three different rows there? I kind of lost you on that. If you back up one slide.
Yeah.
The 3 different product rows.
Yeah, so this is just listed as an example. So we have product A, product B, product C, but on the commercial side of it, it's actually done by product line. So I'm trying to remember what the names are. Like if it's core, if it's pro, it'll, you know, whichever model it is, it'll give you, instead of saying product A, it'll say core. Instead of product B, it'll say pro. Maybe instead of product C, it splits, right? So the commercial splits. So there, as long as you know which product line it falls into, then you would know which discount it would be. I think most of them are close to the same at this point as far as like the discount, but there are some that I think are like a little bit different. There might not be as much discount on some of those. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure about the different values, but I guess that would be apparent if we're dealing with specific products, right?
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just looking real quick. I've seen if I had an example of one real quick, just to pull it up. Oh, so that's where they'd be, but okay. Yeah, I'll try to find an example and pull that up. So the residential side of it. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's a little bit green, kind of moving into this. So it's pre-approved pricing, and it's basically a market IPA. So margin sharing starts at 8%, just like the commercial, right? So we've kind of pre-cooked into this like floor price, and then it gives you a range to move on this matrix, right? So you have a floor price that you're going to start with, and then you can move up from there. As you move up in sell price or GM percent, the cost goes up as well, right? So what this is basically saying, on the bottom we have the blue, we have all the different GM percents. So in other words, if you want to sell it for 14, this is your 14% column that you could sell it for. And then associated to that 14% is your actual cost, right? So when we say floor price, we're looking at this 8%. It starts at 849 at the bottom on this 1.5 ton, but the cost, if you go to 14%, is at 913, right? So that's the margin sharing stuff we were talking about earlier. If you just load in the IPA price that it is, but you actually sell it for more, then we run into variance issues, and it raises flags and says, hey, this doesn't match what I'm supposed to be seeing. And so that's where we had to adjust. And there's a little bit better example coming up, and we'll walk through that too as well on more of like a live version. So this bullet says we will try to consolidate and remove existing dealer/market IPAs when using the matrix. So in other words, we really started this matrix pretty low at the 8%. And basically what we're trying to do is minimize the number of IPAs that you need, right? So if you have 7, 8 dealer market IPAs that are out there, ideally what would happen is between your RAM and myself or my team, we would all work together, and we can pull your transactions, right? So per IPA, what are you claiming? How many are you claiming? What's your sell price? What's your margin? Because the idea is to try to get it into a matrix and get you around the same margin or better margin if it's already there, right? Because this is all pre-approved cost, but it could be potentially better margin for you, and not with no change to your sell price, right? Like that's the thing that we're trying to focus on. It's not just like a hey, here you go, just run with it, and then also keep all the other dealer market IPAs. No, we're trying to consolidate and solidify, like make it a little bit more simplistic on the number of IPAs, and that way that there's no impact to your sell price, right? So, because I know a lot of people are using what is that, Pricebook Digital, right? So you have to submit that stuff to Pricebook Digital. They got to create your books, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So if you don't have to change your sell prices and your sell prices are good, you just want to simplify your IPAs, this would be an easy way to do it, and we can, it doesn't really take that long at all to run the numbers and plug them in to compare, but that way you wouldn't have to create those new dealer sheets and stuff like that. You could keep the same sell price. However, you would have to create new records within WISE to go to a different quote number, because this would be a new market IPA. But long run, right, if you can make more margin on it, it'd probably be worth it. So claimback process is the same as any other job dealer or market IPA. So basically, we call it a matrix, but it's an IPA that we're giving you, and we're just showing you the wide range of it in Excel is what we're doing.
How can they get a copy of this matrix?
So I would work with your RAM, get in touch with your RAM and work with them, and let them know that you're interested, because that'll kind of start the process of us working with you and the RAM and trying to consolidate. Or even if you don't have any dealer market IPAs and you're interested in it, that would be a good conversation starter with the RAM. And then typically once you talk to the RAM, they'll bring us in and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do. because a lot of times if they work with you first, the Rams work with you first, they can send us an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about working with so-and-so from this company. They have, some IPAs out there already. And so we can get a meeting set up, but then prior to that meeting, we can run all that data. So when we get to the meeting, we're ready to talk about it, right? So it's not a ad hoc situation. It's we're ready to talk about it and see what we can do for you.
Thank you.
So we have the matrix tab. That was the previous sheet, right? So it shows you the wide range of sale prices and the costs associated with it. There's another tab on the bottom, and this is what a lot of the Rams will work with you on. And so kind of the key thing here is like the sell price, right? So you can put in a current sell price that you have, right? So this is part of the analysis that we would run. We would put in your sell price, and this will calculate your margin and all your numbers and stuff based on the sell price that you have, but using the matrix pricing, right? So this is just using the 14% column from the previous sheet that you saw, but it'll tell you how much margin dollars you have before margin sharing, what your margin is before the margin sharing, right? Because remember, this matrix starts at 8. And then how much shared margin dollars there are, what your claim back credit's going to be, your adjusted IPA buy price, and how much you're going to net. So really the key important ones on here are going to be your adjusted buy price, right? So when we talked about it earlier, right? If you load that 8% price as your IPA price, but then you start selling it for 20%, your system thinks that you're going to be getting 20%. But the reality is you're getting 14, right? The other part of that is the system also, if you go at the 8% column, so this one would be 849 that we looked at earlier, your cost would be 849 on the IPA. So if you did 849, but your actual price is 912.72, that's going to be the variance, right? Because your system thinks, hey, standard price minus 849 is what I'm getting back. But that's not really true because there's margin sharing involved. And so the adjusted IPA buy price is the actual rebate cost that you would put into your system for there to be no variance. So that's kind of the big important takeaway there. Just to be variance free, error free, that would be the way to do it right there with the adjusted price. And that'll also help, depending on if you do your own claim backs or if Corp's doing claim backs for you, it makes it a little bit cleaner that way for them. They're not having to deal with all the errors, right? But then also if you're doing them, like you're not having to fight through and try to figure out what the errors are, and then it just gets frustrating every month, right? Whenever you submit claim backs, you're like, these numbers never match. Like, I think it should be $10,000 a month. Next month it's 9, the next month it's 8, and then the next month it's 12, right? Like, it's always like a guessing game of like, well, what should it be? But if we load in the adjusted prices on those, then when we have margin sharing, then there's going to be no variance, right? So then we're going to know we're going to hit true every time. And it's going to happen. Like sometimes it'll happen with, like maybe you sell it for more than what you thought, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, as long as you're working with your adjusted prices, there should be little to no variance. So that's the residential matrix, and we talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So creating an IPA. So really there's 2 ways. One, you go through Navigator, and then there's a pricing. There's like a little menu tab at the top, and if you go to pricing and go to quote management, that's typically what you use for residential IPAs. With commercial IPAs, same thing at the top. There's selection and create project. So typically used for commercial IPAs. You can use it for residential. It does have AHRI numbers by the system, right? So if you plug in a system, it'll tell you, hey, here's your AHRI number for that system. But if you already know what system you want to use, easier to go through quote management, a lot quicker and less steps. But to go through selection, you got to create a project, do all the different stuff. It's just a little bit more lengthy step, but I would recommend it for the commercial side of it, because if you do have a non-base model, right? So you kind of have a customized commercial model. If it has not been created before, you can't do it through quote management. So if you're creating a brand new model that has never been, in theory, created in our system, you would actually have to go in there and what is it? Validate, I think is what it's called. So you actually go in there and click on that to validate it, and then the system will think about it for a second, and it says, "Oh yeah, we can make that model for you," and it'll give you a check mark. So.
Hey, Sean, I have a question. I hate to back up on the pricing matrix, but for example, if a revision to a model comes out, are those revisions automatically added? How often is it updated?
Yeah, so right now we're working through the A2L transition, right? So the easy answer would be, like, we'll go in there and add them. The more difficult answer would be is like, how long is it going to take us, right? So one of the things in the commercial matrix, or not the commercial, but the residential matrix that we're doing, right? So when we talked about consolidating, so we were trying to consolidate the number of IPAs that you have. It's kind of a twofold thing. One, it's to make it a little bit more simpler and easier on the customer. The second part of it is a capacity issue, right? So the more IPAs that we have from a dealer market standpoint, when we go through a price increase or an IPA increase, it's only me and 3 other people on my team, right? So I have 3 people that report to me, and then it's me. So we have 4 people, and from a dealer market IPA perspective, we have about 1,000 of them. So we have to copy all of those and then reprice them internally. And so it takes a good amount of time to get through all of that, right? So there's only 4 of us. We get some help from the coordinators and stuff, the people that process the claimbacks, to get them copied over, but actual working of the IPAs is us. And so if we can get that narrowed down some, that kind of works hand in hand, right? So making it simpler on the customer by consolidating and moving to the matrix. And then also internally, we would have less IPAs as well, and we have a little bit more capacity to go in there and get those models added in a more timely manner, right? The current crossroads we're looking at right now is on the A2L product. Because the matrix covers so many different models from a residential standpoint, I mean, it's like 400 to 500 models, right? When you go in to modify those IPAs, it takes a little bit of time to go in there and add all those new models in, right? And the more you add, the bigger the IPA gets, the longer it takes to load, the longer it takes to just function in general. And so we're kind of at that crossroads where we have some internal tickets submitted for like updating, like quote status, quote management, to be faster, but also to be able to do different things, right? So if you've been in quote status before, then you know when you're looking at 100 lines, if you need to go delete a couple models, first thing is you can only delete one at a time, right? So the bigger the IPA gets, the longer it takes. And if you need to delete 10 models off a 100-line IPA, I mean, it could take a couple minutes to go do that. So one of the submission tickets we submitted was to delete multiple lines at a time. So that if we can get that through fairly quickly, that'll help us on this A2L transition, because we can get rid of some of the old product and keep the same quote number. The other point would be is if we go to the A2L transition and use the matrix stuff, right? Do we just create another IPA with the A2L stuff, knowing that the other stuff is going to fall off? So it's kind of twofold. It's like we're trying to make it simple on you, give you less IPAs, but then on the other hand, it's like from a system capacity standpoint, can we do that, or do we have to give you another IPA, right? So then we're kind of going backwards on number of IPAs that are out there. So right now we're kind of leaning towards just adding them to the existing IPAs, knowing that it's going to be a little bit more lengthy process, but in the long run, it's a little bit easier because then you, like from the customer standpoint, you don't have to reload records for another quote number, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at internally.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Can they please just add a new IPA and not add to an existing IPA? Is that an option?
That is an option, right? And that's kind of what I was talking about right there was we can add the new A2L product to a new IPA, or even the customer, like if you want to create that separation between A2L and the old product, the old CR2 product, right? Yeah, you can do that as well, and we can run the matrix off of that, off of both of them. But yeah, it's really tough ask because one, it keeps getting bigger, but then the other way is we're adding more IPAs. So.
Hey, Sean, this is Stephen Matthews from Petersburg. I'm the one that asked the last two questions, and they're really because my market IPA now is like 723 line items long. It goes as far back as THJDs, and I've just found it's easier to keep adding instead of deleting because it is so cumbersome to delete lines.
Correct. Yeah.
So, and that's where I was wondering if we could just add a completely fresh IPA. So if we ever have to edit it in the future, we're not at 900 lines.
Yeah, and thanks for picking up, Stephen. I appreciate that. Yeah, so I mean that it is a possibility, right? Like personally, like I'm not in distribution, right? So I don't have to set up all those rules and records and everything else. But I would think a new IPA creating that separation would be ideal, especially because a lot of that product's going to fall off, right? And without us being able to delete more than one line at a time, it's going to be so cumbersome that it's going to be tough. And a tough ask for anybody. And it might literally be way faster just to reload the new records under a new IPA.
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts.
From our side, I just don't even delete anything anymore. So my IPA is like 700 lines, but what I put into my system is probably 70. So you guys, in my opinion, you're doing extra work you don't have to by keep adding to the same IPA.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Stephen. Because like a lot of times, what you'll see is, we have, 500 lines on this matrix or whatever, right? But you're only going to be using, maybe 100 of them, right? So, but it does give you that blanket coverage. If you did ever need to use it, then you could use it. So that's kind of the helpful part of it, because when you need it, then you're gonna have to go add it if you don't have it. So,
Oh no, I agree. But I was saying if we added a separate one for this because we're going to do a new refrigerant, the other one's eventually going to have to fall off. So,
right,
that makes a clean line to me.
Yeah, it was going to make it. It was going to make it a lot easier before the government said, "Well, if you make it in 2024, you can sell it in 2025," but you can't make it in 2025 but when they originally came out, they were like, "No, you can't even sell it in 2025."
Yeah.
So that was kind of line in the sand, and like, well, that makes it an easy separation. But then they came back and said, well, if you make it 2024, you can sell it in 2025. So knowing that, like, it's still a little bit of that gray area, but I think from a manufacturing perspective, that's probably good for a lot of manufacturers to cover that gap. But that's a different conversation. So. Okay, so yeah, 2 ways to create an IPA, pricing, quote management, and I have an example where to go for that. So within Navigator, you just go to the top and you have the pricing tab, and there's quote management there. There's also quote status, again, if you need to modify an IPA. And then lo and behold, we have the price list that we talked about earlier, about, good data in, good data out, way to filter it. And then we also have Selection Navigator. So there was pricing, there's selection, create project. And you can go through the steps on that to create your project. I do have a template deck on that, but it's like 20 slides long, and I didn't want to put you guys through that. So there is one for that. So I can send that to Robin, or and Robin can send it out to the RAM. So if you have questions on that, it's a pretty good detailed deck that walks you through it and the different steps.
That'd be great.
Because there are some tips and tricks in there, especially there's like a viewing tab or a viewing drop down, and that's the biggest one. So if you take away anything from that, just remember when you go to the grid, there's a drop down for the viewing, and that's where you want to make your changes there. Okay, so that was for Selection Navigator. That's all I had on that. So I will share the matrix. So this is what the matrix looks like. I know, Robin, you asked earlier about how do we get this out to customers. So working with Bobby and Jess, they were not just like sending these out, right? So really the thing is working with your RAM to get some of this stuff accomplished, and then we can get it created. And then once we get it created, we'll give you a sheet that looks pretty similar to like one of these, right? But the actual matrix itself, they weren't sending out. But really the way this works is we earlier were looking at sell prices here in blue. And I'll blow this up a little bit because I'm sure that's pretty small. So we have sell prices in blue, and then we have costs in green. But really the way that it works is we're looking at like these floor prices, right? So if I unhide this, it's just basic information, right? So what's the MLP of the product? What's your standard price? Your standard price being your everyday price, right? What are you bringing into stock at? What's that cost? And then we have a calculation for the IPA, but for the IPA price. And then this IPA input price. So this IPA input price is the same price as this 8% column, right? So those are one and the same. That didn't work, but. So this 8% cost and this IPA input price are the same thing, right? So that's the floor that we're talking about. That's the price that's going to go on the IPA. Now, what happens when we were talking about that earlier was, you know, hey, if you're selling this at 16% at $9.20 and you load $6.99, what is that? $9.20 minus $6.99. Oh, that's 24%. So there's that 24%. Your system thinks you're making 24%, but in reality, you're only making 16% because we're working off this 16% column. And this would be your adjusted price here, the 772. So if you load in 699, your system thinks you're going to be making, you know, a lot bigger claim back than what you're actually going to get. And so our system on the margin sharing side adjusts into the IPA price / net cost, which brings it up to 772 instead of 699. So that's just that claim back piece that we're talking about with the adjusted buy price. So when we've been working with these matrix files, there's a couple different ways to do this, right? So you can plug in a sell price here, and as you go. And what we've kind of been doing is there's a couple ways to do this, but if you're looking at internally, like you can put your prices in here, and then we can kind of format it right to be like 2% below, 2% above to kind of give you a 4% window, and we can format it to highlight it, you know, in that area. The other option is you can put in the competitive sell price, right? And then same thing, 2% below, 3% below, 3% above, and give you a 6% window to see where some of those sell prices are hitting, right? So you can instantly go in here, plug in competitive sell prices, see where it hits on your matrix, and if it's feasible to do it on your matrix or not. Also, you can even do it for internal purposes, right? The other option is if you're going to have like counter sheets or anything like that, right? Like you can pick a column here for your sell prices that you know you could put on there. If you're going to bundle something, right, like a counter bundle, you could, you know, if you're going at 22%, you could pick, you know, a 2-ton air conditioner, pair it with a furnace and a coil, knowing that your counter sheet price is 22%. So a bunch of different options on that. But really, this is a big, broad view of what the matrix looks like and what it is. And then earlier we talked about the worksheet view. So if we go into the worksheet, this is where we can break it out, right, and make it a little bit more detailed and I don't want to say user friendly, but like by level friendly. So If you want to sell at multiple different levels, right, we can do this on this same IPA or this same IPA number or the same matrix. So that way you can have, 3, 4, 5 different levels and assign those dealers to the different levels, and then do it here. So, on this one, if I wanted to, I can make this as easy as just grabbing this 18% sell price. Oh, I need to grab these. And you paste in your sell price, and again, it's telling you, hey, you're at 18%, right? Again, our floor, remember we were at 849. Now our adjusted price is 966. So just a reminder, this is the price that we need to load in the system, this adjusted price. So it's going to get us this net 18%, and the correct claim back credit would be 215. Because if you did not put that in there, your system would think that you're at, was it 849? So 1182.50 minus 849. So your system, if you put in your 8% price here, this 849, your system thinks you're going to get 333.50 back. But with the margin sharing, when it goes to 966, you're only going to get 215, right? So you've already made that margin on your side. You're just getting the less credit from us on our side. And so that's kind of a sticking point, right? Because you think we're taking the rebate away from you, but we're not. We're just, instead of us, again, putting that extra percentage in our pocket, we're just putting it into the price, and you're already keeping your percentage from the sale. So, but yeah, so that comes up a lot with this adjusted buy price with the margin sharing. Just, again, make sure you're using that adjusted buy price to load in your system for your cost. So kind of the benefit of this is also, if you had a competitive sell price, you could plug it in. So on this product, that they're selling it for $10.50, you can instantly tell what it's going to be, right? You can just plug in any price you want. They're going to go $10.50, $11.50, $12.50, $12.75, $13.50, $1,400, and $1,500. I know there's not very big gaps there, but that's just to show you what it looks like. And we're still calculating margin, right? So if that's a competitive sell price, we're at 1,500. That's probably not going to be ideal to go -4. But that gives you an instant look of where does it hit on my matrix, because it'd be the same thing as you plugging it into here, and it kind of showing you where you land. This would just instantly tell you like what your net percentage would be, what price you need to load in your system, and how much you're going to get back. So it kind of works pretty well that way, because again, you can do it by dealer level, right? Or dealer one, or if you have, a couple different dealers that you're working with, or groups, right? So if you want to put group A, group B, group C, you could have a 22% group, an 18% group, a 15% group, depending on how you want to lay your pricing out. It kind of gives you the options to go out there and do that. So in other words, I want to say it was last year we did the voice of the customer. And so a lot of the customers took surveys, right? And they were like, well, one of the things that stuck out to them was like, I feel like we have to fight pricing sometimes just to get some margin, right? And so we were like, well, we have a lot of IPAs. How do we simplify the IPAs? How do we reduce the number of IPAs? How do we make it easier on you? And so we kind of came up with this, right? So this starts you at an aggressive floor, right? The 8% floor, but also gives you the ability to go up however you need, right? So we can move it. You can move it, based on whatever margin you think you need to make, or what price point you can hit in your market, and gives you the ability to move up and down however you see fit. And then there's no coming to pricing for that, right? Like it's just you have a market IPA for this matrix, and you're moving up and down as you see fit and making those records inside of your system and then claiming back at the end of the month. So that's kind of the matrix in the bundle there. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. Okay.
Is margin sharing always half?
Yes. So whatever that margin sharing point is, anything that you go over that point is going to be half. but I don't want that it sound like a negative, right? Like half, right? Because if you look at it from a standpoint of like when we put the margin sharing point at 12, on the upfront side of it, so we talked about claimbacks, and I know with like wind supply, claimbacks are 99.8% of what we do. That's how the margin share works. But on the upfront side of it, right? So if you get an IPA and you get that IPA price on your order, that's the upfront side of the business. That is when you're limited to the margin, right? So if we put 12% on that upfront IPA, 12% is what you're supposed to be selling it for. But when you do an upfront IPA, you kind of open yourself up to audits, right? So we have an audit group separate of the pricing team. We have nothing to do with them, but they'll look at different serial numbers. They'll pull out purchases, and so if you are on an upfront IPA and you sell that product, say at 16%, and auditing pulls that serial number that you sold at 16 instead of 12, and what they'll do is they'll pull that serial number and they'll say, you know, hey, customer so-and-so, can you please send me your invoice information for this serial number, right? You pull it, you send it to them, and I want to say it's like Pandora's box, right? But once they find one thing, they're like, well, let me ask a couple more questions. And then they can ask a couple more questions, right? And so not that it's always a bad thing, but from a claimback side of it, it's much more easier to maintain your inventory because, you know, you can put it all in the same pile and pull it out and claim on different IPAs. But once you go to the upfront side of it, if you order for a project, you got to keep that separate. If you order for a dealer IPA, you got to keep that separate because those serial numbers that you order through the quote are tied to that job or that dealer, right? And so the bigger you get, the harder it is to try to manage that inventory. But from a claimback side, you put it all in the same pile and you pull it out and claim it on a different bucket. So, but yeah, that's how that works. And yes, it is always half over the margin sharing point. There we go. So on pricing, when we were looking at quote management earlier, if I go to pricing, go to quote management, this is what it looks like. So there's going to be a place for you to put your email and then your phone number. It says it's required. It actually lets you go through without, but you didn't hear that from me. So you do need to put in your information here. And then you're going to put in a project name. So this is some of the required information. You have to put in a project. So we'll just do the test IPA in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The dealer name, Snowman. Competition. So competition is going to be your brand, right? What brand are you competing against? Is it Daikin, Goodman, Carrier, Trane, Lennox? Who is it? We'll say Daikin. Competitive price. So if it's a job IPA and you know the price that you need to be at, you'd put your competitive price in, right? And then you can say it's an estimate or an actual. If you mark estimate, then that just means you think that's where you need to be. You don't really know. If you mark actual, that means you have something in your hand that you've seen the price on, or you can share it and say, hey, this is where I need to be. And that way you can, if we, you know, worst case scenario, you have to show it to us and, you know, we try to get there, whatever. But actual just means that you've seen the price or you have the price that it can be proven. But if it's estimate, you put your best guess in there. If it's a dealer or market IPA on this competitive price, you can literally just put 1. That's all you need to put. So then we have some other options here. So these are like when we were talking about the job requirements. What did it require? This is some of that information. So is, you know, residential, new construction, replacement. Is it single family, multifamily, basis of design? Again, on the basis of design, if you click that, that does mean that you have the submittals that say, you know, Champion is the brand that is the basis of design for that. So if you do have that, typically what will happen is if you submit that and then send it via email that Champion is the BOD, that you, like, we'll do whatever we can to get you that job, like, because you are the BOD, like we're going to do everything we can to get you that job. Now, if it's BOD another brand, like, you know, another sister brand, we typically don't quote that like two different ways, right? So whatever it's BOD as, that's typically what we'll go with on the IPA side, and that's just for fairness, right? So if it is BOD champion, then anybody else that comes in for it, we're going to put it at standard and say, hey, I'm sorry, this is BOD by somebody else. But if it's BOD by a competitive brand, then you would just pick single family, multifamily, and we will just go after this like every other project. So we have dealer market job, which one is it? And we have claim back and up front. We talked about that a little bit. So if we just do this one as a job, and we can add in a couple models. I'm just going to go back to the matrix and grab some. I'm going to put my brand, my quantity, and then add. That's one way to do it. I'm going to go grab.
How do they use a commercial matrix on units that they have on the floor? Do you know how they would get the claim back? Is this something they have to do manually?
Yeah, so if you already have commercial units in stock, then you already have like 90% of the information that you need. You just need to figure out from a commercial standpoint, which column are you going to use for your margin, and that'll give you the multiplier to assign to that product or that MLP, right? Now, it gets a little bit gray on some of this stuff. So if it's a old model, right? So you just have an old model sitting around. It's not the MLP at the time that you paid for it. It's the MLP currently, right? So if it's an active model, but it's a little bit older and we went through a price increase or 2 price increases, it's not going to be the MLP at the time that you paid for it. And that's not what the credit you're going to get from us on it. It would be the current pricing. So the way our system works, it says, okay, here's your current MLP. Here's your current standard price. You submit the IPA for that, like 12% column, right? It's going to give you a rebate back on your current price or your current standard price minus that IPA price. And that's how the rebate's figured. It's not taking into consideration what you paid for it at the previous time. So in other words, if it was a price increase ago, when you get your rebate back, it's going to be on the new pricing, because anything new that's bought is going to go on that price increase. But anything that is in existing inventory, it will still basically carry over as a price increase, because when you get when you calculate the rebate, that's how it works. So it still kind of covers the existing inventory as well. Does that answer the question? Anybody that asks a question, feel free to speak up. I mean, we can talk about it.
Hey, Sean, not to beat a dead horse, but I'm just going through this whole new IPA versus adding it to an existing one. A couple of thoughts I have real quick. If we just add a new IPA, and you can tell this is the route I want to go, but if we just add a new IPA, the old IPA should stay in place at the same costing, right? Because you're not manufacturing it, so there should be no price increases. It should just be defunct come January 1, right? It just is what it is until we sell out. And then you add an A2L one, and it's a fresh slate going forward, right?
Correct. Yeah. And so typically what'll happen is when we go through like IPA increases, we typically only increase active product. So if it's phase out or obsolete product that you might have in stock, we don't increase it on the IPA.
Well, and that's what I thought. That's why I was leaning towards the starting a new one just makes better sense because I really hate my IPA. I think I've offered to buy Rodney a case of whiskey if he just fixes mine, but he won't because every time I try to, it crashes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating. Like we were talking about the capacity of it earlier on the system, but yeah, I mean, yeah, that's typically how it works. And the example I gave on a commercial model would be if that model's active, right?
Yeah.
But if it's not if it's not an active model, then chances are it's going to be at all the rebates and the claimbacks and stuff are going to go at the price whatever at the time we sold it, unless there was like a price increase like right after that, and it was still an active model.
Sure.
But yeah, so
But
typically on
that's more the
IPAs we're only
exception.
doing the active.
That's more the exception than the rule, though, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So, yeah, no problem.
So
Yeah,
I
so-
asked the question on the commercial matrix on stuff we have on the floor.
Yeah.
Right now, our Y system does it, our claimbacks automatically for our RPA or IPAs, like on the residential side. It won't know to do that on the commercial side on something we have on the floor, correct? That's something that we would have to process manually.
Yeah, so you would, yeah, so if you have it on the floor and you can quote it, so say you try to quote it 3 times, right?
Yep.
The first 2 you lost, you don't have to create an IP on it if you're using the commercial matrix pricing and you bid it out and it doesn't win, then you don't have to do anything with it, right? But
Correct.
say that happens twice, and then the third time, say you did it at like 14% or 12% or whatever, and the third time you're like, you know what? Like I'm just going to take the 8 and get it out of here, and that's the one that wins, right?
Right.
At that point, you would need to create an IPA with that model on it at the 8%. So when I say 8%, we're going to
I got
put
you.
8%
Okay.
here, and using that 8% cost as well.
All right.
So,
Yeah, I
so
got
that
it
would
now.
yeah, so that would give you the IPA number to then put in your system as a quote number to then tie it to that dealer for that model and that price.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Another question, do you know roughly percentage wise how many sales are transacted without an IPA nationwide?
Yeah, so it exact number, no, but it's definitely regionally based, right? So in the South, the Southeast, it's a lot more competitive as far as like pricing is, right? The minimum SEER is higher. It gets a lot dirtier on the price and stuff. So in the South, the Southeast, we're looking at a lot more IPA use, just because of where we're at. In the North, in the Northeast, there's less IPA use. I mean, there's still IPA usage, but there's a lot less. Just being able to get to some of those price points at standard, right? And so the last couple of years, when we roll out new products, we haven't been as much like charging a big standard price, right? Because the higher the standard price is, the more IPAs you're going to get. So we've been trying to be pretty targeted on where we're at with where we set that standard price at, and we've been pretty successful in the North and Northeast so far. In some markets, right? The bigger the market, the more competition there's going to be, the lower the pricing is. But we've been pretty good at that with the latest product launches and stuff in the last couple of years. But yeah, it's typically regionally based, right? So if I go Southwest, I know like res packs are going to be on IPAs, right? Like that's just a given. In the South, in the Southeast, heat pumps and res packs are going to be on IPAs. Like it's just a given. But yeah, a lot of times in the North, depending on the market, but we can get away with a lot more standard price transactions and IPA transactions. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I added these 30 SKUs, a total of 30, right? 10 on each. So we have this project for 10 systems each, or 10 systems total. So I can do this a couple different ways. I can price this. I can go in here and I can put in a requested discount or a requested price on each line. I can also do it from the header, and I'll show you kind of how this works. So the thing that you got to remember on this requested price is this is not the unit price. This is the like extended requested price. So extended being unit times quantity, right? So for this one, if I want to sell this one at, like you say, $1,200, it would be 1,200 times, oh, excuse me, if I wanted 1,200, if I want to sell it at 1,200 and make 12%, it's going to be 1056. That would be the price that I want to put in there. That's the unit price, so I got to times it by 10. So 10,560 would be my price here. Now I'll click calculate. And it's going to calculate the discount for me. I could also just put in a discount here if I know that's where I need to be. That's going to calculate it for me. And then same scenario here. I'm going to sell it for 700. The 616 times 10 gives me 6160. So I can do that, and then I can go up here. It's already calculated all this information for me. I want to put it in at 12%. I'll clear out the sell price because my purchase price has already been calculated at 12. I'll calculate that. So now I have a sell price margin. At this point, it's ready to go. I can continue. And here I can either submit or save. So submit means it's going to go to the pricing team. If I save it, that means I'm going to come back to it later and do something else with it. If I save it, it will create an IPA number, but it will not go anywhere like for anybody to look at. So if you save it, you know, we don't know that you saved it. We only see what's submitted. So another option would be to price it. Is if I wanted, say, if I knew competitively I needed to sell it for 30,970, I can put 12% in here. I can put in a sell price of 30,970. I can then calculate this. So this is showing me my purchase price. The reason I'm calculating my purchase price is because I already know how much margin I want to make and what I want to sell it for. And then when I use this purchase price, I can then come down here and click this calculate button, which will then push pricing down to here. But didn't like it on that one. Give me a funky discount. But that's the way that would work. So I can actually do it from a header level up here and then push the pricing down to here. Or I can do it at each level and then recalculate up here. There's two different ways to do it. Whichever one, you know, if you know where you need to be, I would recommend doing it that. If you don't know where you need to be, you can just do it at each line item if you want to as well. The other only thing in quote management would be is when we're talking about adding lines to an IPA, right? So if we were looking at, you know, all these different models. So if I was going to quote, you know, I didn't know which exact coil I was going to use, I could put multiple in there. So I can like copy this and I can paste it in here and add it. Or if there's a couple models that I want to add, I can do this mass quote entry and I can come in here and I can paste it, choose my brand, choose my quantity, and then add. Then I can go grab another one, do it again, grab another one, do it again. And then once I get all the ones I want in here, I can just add them to the quote and they'll just come in here at the bottom. So now they're down here. Another feature that you could use is if you want to add TCE2Bs, right? So we want the whole line TCE2B. But maybe we don't know the whole model number or we want to add a whole line. All you have to do is put an asterisk here. and then tell it the brand and how many you want of each, and then we can search. And so what this will do is pull anything that starts with TCE2B, and it'll show us here. So not the biggest box in the world, doesn't get any bigger, but and so kind of one thing to remember is here, whatever you click first, if you're going to highlight that row, that's what's going to go first in your order. So if I click this one and then this one and then go down, I can add them all at the same time. And they put them down here, but you can see I click that 2 ton before I click the 1.5 ton, so the 2 ton shows up first. So when you search, just remember whichever one you click first is which one's going to show first. So just something to keep in mind on that. You know, if you're preferential to your order to be in 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3. So that is quote management. Anybody have any questions on that?
There are no questions in the chat.
Okay. Well, that's pretty much all I have. I know I went over a little bit, so I appreciate y'all hanging on. The ones that did, I can't see the people that are on there or have dropped, but the ones that are hanging on, thank you. I'm sorry for going a little bit over there, but
That's all right. This is important. Does anybody have any other questions for Sean while we have him? Please feel free to unmute yourself or throw them in the chat. Now is the time.
see a lot of names I recognize.
Yep. Okay, well, if you have any questions that you think of later, please feel free to reach out to me or your RAM or anybody on the champion team. Let us know what you're thinking. If you have questions, if you have additional topics that you would like to see on office hours, please let us know that as well. I want to thank Sean for joining us today. And thank you everybody for hanging on a little extra. And we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.